me. And a massive thank you to Gaby for joining us this evening. It's really late, it's 10:30, probably 20 to 11 in Israel, so thank you so much. Gaby has been a really, really special friend for over 30 years. She was actually my roommate in Israel when we were both 18 and living in Jerusalem. And I would say that out of everyone I've ever met in my life, Gaby and her family really introduced me to Shabbat and to Judaism. And every single Yom Tov, when we were there for the year, without fail, Gaby's sisters and family invited me to stay with them every single Hag. It was so incredible because I didn't really have close family in Israel at the time. And they were so kind and so generous to me, and I'll never ever forget their warmth and love, and how they really showed me a beautiful Jewish home. After we spent the year in Israel, we then ended up at Leeds University together. I was studying law, and Gaby was allegedly studying psychology, but was spending far more time in the theatres and all the drama and all the activity of JSOC. And did an amazing degree, but that was just the degree was just a sideline. And then in her early 20s, moved to Jerusalem. As a child, Gaby grew up a rabbi's daughter. She was Rabbi Mrs. Shine's daughter from Central Synagogue, and they were the Rabbi and Rebbetzin for 37 years. So Gaby has got so many stories of being a rabbi's daughter in central London with very, very posh lords and ladies as their congregants. And more recently, Gaby married Stephen, has got 4 wonderful, beautiful children, and has got very involved through having Hallel is gorgeous. She was 10 the other week, and she's been very involved in being a champion for children with special needs, and also championing an inclusive Jerusalem. So Gaby's got so much to say. So without further ado, I hand over to Gaby, but just a massive thank you for joining us this evening.
So first of all, thank you so much, Juliet. As I say, you're one of the biggest brachas in my life. Every now and again, you meet a friend who becomes a sister from another mister. And that's very much how we feel about our relationship. And thank you for the honor of being here. Hello, everyone. I see so many familiar faces, and that's so lovely. Is that Nikki from Machon? Yeah. Is that you? Yeah.
I can't believe you actually remember me. That's hilarious. I said to that, and I said, oh, you know, Gaby was my majacha when I was on Machon in 93, 94.
Right, absolutely. Give me 1 second. Hang on.
That is amazing, Nikki. That is amazing that she remembers you.
Because someone's not in bed. So we're having a hello from Hallel. This is Hallel, who haven't got her glasses on, so you actually can't see what's going on. Okay, good night. I'll give you one in the morning. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll give one to Daddy. Hang on 1 second.
Nikki, which youth organisation were you?
I was with Mcauley.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Everyone goes, what, sports? And we're like, we didn't do just sport.
Well, you know, Gaby was very involved in drama with Mcauley.
I can tell you that much.
Is it very bad when your kid comes to ask you for a sweet, but it's actually a thing of a vitamin C tablet and they think it's a sweet? Okay. So yes, hi Nikki, and hi lovely friends and familiar faces from home life, and lots of new faces that I'm very privileged to be here with. So Juliet asked me to tell you a little bit about how I grew up and what I've been doing since then. So I guess I'll start at the beginning. Being a rabbi's daughter, as many of you might know, is a challenge at the best of times. But being a rabbi's daughter in Great Portland Street is a special challenge. I think my siblings and I at some point felt that coming to Israel was a form of Megxit. It was very much, you have the feeling of being representative of the royal family in the shul in some way. You always have to be on your best behavior. You always have to show your best midot. You always have to be an ambassador for Yiddishkeit. And you have that from the minute you're born. And it's quite a tall thing to live up to. I think I was very lucky because I inherited a lot of my father's brachot of self-confidence and self-esteem and loving being with people and loving being in community, and really received his legacy from that. Whereas for my older siblings who were incredibly shy, it was very difficult for them. And that was really our lives growing up. As Juliet said, it was the lords and ladies of English British London society who were in our shul. And we had, I don't know, you know the history of the shuls in the West End, but there was a great, I don't know if there still is, feud between Great Portland Street and Marble Arch. Because Great Portland Street was really all the peerages, knighthoods, dames, etc. And Marble Arch was the self-made millionaires. And there was a great snobbery between the two. So, you know, never the twain should meet. We never do activities together. There was always terrible broiguses between the two communities. And that was what it was like growing up in the West End. You know, I'd be a kid, our local garden was Regent's Park. We would walk on Shabbat. One of my greatest memories actually is not having an Eruv, because I had terrible hay fever. And my siblings and I used to go and hide tissues in the bushes on Friday afternoons so that we could go on a walk on Shabbos and be able to blow our nose, because we would meet all the congregants and we didn't want to be snotty-nosed in front of all the very posh people that we would meet as we were walking through Regent's Park, which is so crazy to think about now. And I remember going with my father and my mother, and we would get to that big boardwalk in the middle of Regent's Park, and all the congregants would be sitting on the benches, and people would just, you know, sort of salute as we would walk up and down the avenue in Regent's Park, giving kavod to my mother and father. And it was such an amazing thing to be a part of, but also a lot of pressure. I remember one Sunday afternoon, I was playing in Regent's Park with my mum on my tricycle, and we were just coming out of the inner circle, and a Rolls Royce draws up, and it was Lady Edith Wolfson, who lived next door to the shul on Portland Place. And her chauffeur got out, and she told him to take my bicycle so that she could give us a ride home. And he picked it up with his white gloves, looking very disdainfully at my dirty tricycle, put it in the boot of the Rolls Royce, and drove us home. Which only, you know, many years later, I realized that there's a crazy kind of childhood memories to have. I mean, I went to Menorah Primary School because obviously my parents wanted me to have a very strong Jewish education. And I was late every morning because I had to wait for my daddy to finish davening in Shacharit and then drive all the way from the West End to Golders Green, which meant that I was late every single morning. And for some reason, the teachers never got around it why I was late every morning, and I was always getting into trouble for being late every single morning in my school life, and that never kind of got past that. And my friends who used to come to visit were terribly excited. You know, my local supermarket was Selfridges. That was the kosher section. That was where we would go to shop. So when my friends wanted to come and go to Oxford Street because it was so exciting, I was like, oh, that's our local supermarket. What do we want to go to the shops for? So it was really only retrospectively that I understood that this was not really a normal way to grow up. But I did learn an immense amount from it. One of the amazing things about it was my father, Zichrono Livracha, was actually very liberally minded for an Orthodox rabbi. He was a great Talmud Chacham, and he was an extremely charismatic Rav, and an incredible community builder, who left a great legacy in that community in Great Portland Street. The stories are still abound of him knocking on doors, house to house, in the middle of the Six-Day War, raising money for Israel and managing to get money to Israel when it most needed it. Tirelessly without sleeping night after night, and getting all the philanthropists to be able to get together and support Israel. Just thinking back on that experience, my father was so liberally minded in a very non-liberally minded world in the 70s and 80s, especially in the United Synagogue. So he could get away with things a little more, I think, because we were in the West End and we were a little sheltered from everyone else. So, for example, I did Anim Zmirot until I was a Bat Mitzvah, which I think even now would be shocking in most shuls. But I was allowed to do that, and actually did it together with a cousin's daughter. So that was something that was very different. And because I had such a role, I think I was also the first bat mitzvah in our shul, even though then that meant a Sunday afternoon saying some Tehillim. I was still allowed to sing, and it was the first bat mitzvah in the community. And that was, only afterwards again I could appreciate how revolutionary that was and how brave that was for my father, Zichrono Livracha, to take that stance. And I think it actually made it all the harder for me when I turned bat mitzvah, because I had been so much part of it. I was also, again, that part of being part of the ambassador of Yiddishkeit and of the rabbi's family. I would be asked to sit next to different members of the congregation, and I sing. That's one of the things I do, and they would enjoy my singing of the tefillot. So I would sit in the men's section next to different VIPs, who I love very much, who I called Uncle this and Uncle that. And I would come home to my mother and say, "Oh, you'll never believe what Uncle Isaac said to Lord Peter," etc., etc., etc. And this is me as an 8-year-old, not understanding quite what the world that I was growing up in and how strange it was. But it meant that at bat mitzvah, all of a sudden the gate closed and up I went into the gallery. And that was incredibly frustrating for me, because I had been allowed that leeway. And I found that very difficult. And one of the other things that I think about a lot is in the role of women in those days, in the 70s and 80s and in the United Synagogue, was my mother worked as hard, if not harder, than my father. She was really an unpaid social worker, if I look at it today. She worked tirelessly to support every member of the community, to be their psychologist and social worker, to provide community gatherings, hosting every Shabbat, every Chag. We never had private meals, family meals on Chagim and Shabbatot. It was always for people in the community. And it was beautiful because we always felt that we were sharing something joyous and rich and wonderful, and people were appreciating it. But our life was never our own. And my mother was always referred to as the rabbi's wife or the Rebbetzin, whereas I really always felt that she was like another rabbi, right? The Rebbetzin really had a role of another rabbi and should really have been a job and understood as a job in its own right. And that's something that I think is changing a lot today. The Rebbetzins these days are teachers and just as much have a role in clergy and in community as their husbands do. But in those days, it was very much just something that you were assumed to do, and it wasn't something that you were paid for or acknowledged for or anything. So it's good to see that the world has progressed in that sense. So it was quite a lonely existence because all my friends lived in Golders Green. There weren't many children in the West End. And what I would do is spend my time climbing up. We lived above the shul, so it was a bit like Notre Dame. It was also very strange. And by the time I was 13, all my siblings had already made Aliyah because they were much older than me. I was the little one. So the shul was my playground. I used to climb up to the balcony and watch from the choir gallery all the weddings. I used to go up to the choir gallery at midnight and play they had one of those big fancy organs with all the pulleys that you could make all the crazy noises with, and the pedals. I used to play the organ at midnight in the middle of this great cathedral-like shul. I'd sneak into the warden's boxes and hide chocolate in there and have midnight feasts. Who has a shul as their playground as part of their childhood? It's quite amazing to think about. And when I got a little bit older, one of the great things about being in the West End, even though I was very young, 12, 13, 14, was I had Hillel House in Euston, just around the corner. And that really saved me as a teenager, especially from the isolation, because, the nearest Bnei Akiva was in St. John's Wood, which was quite a far walk. There were 2 of us at some point in Marble Arch, but that didn't go on for very long, because there were only 2 of us. We used to have Bnei Akiva in the banqueting suite in Marble Arch. I used to spend a lot of time with the students in Hillel. And that's really how I got involved with AJ6 and then UJS, because I've been hanging out with the older students and people who are involved in student politics and student activism from age 13. And it was something that had come very naturally to me just by nature of where I was and where I was hanging out and who I was hanging out with. And the other thing that I really did was there was an organization called Mcauley Association in London. It was a very secular organization, a secular Jewish organization, but what they had was a theater and they put on musicals. And that was my life also as a teenager, was being able to perform, being able to have a Jewish youth club where I could perform. I remember I was the only religious one there, and things like they'd never even heard of the Omer, and we did Fiddler on the Roof, and it was scheduled to be during the Omer, and trying to navigate that whole world of being a religious kid in a secular Jewish world was also something I think also that came from my upbringing in Great Portland Street, because most of the people there were not observant, but they affiliated to the United Synagogue, which was very much Minhag Anglia, the way the United Synagogue was way back when, especially in the West End and other places like it. One of my craziest memories, sometimes funny memories, is walking back home, because when I was 13 we moved around the corner. We didn't live on top of the shul anymore, we moved around the corner, and the wheel clamp had just been invented, and it was Rosh Hashanah morning, and as we walked back from shul, all the Rolls Royces of the people that had come to shul had been wheel clamped, and my father basically walked down the road back to our house with you can see everyone yelling and screaming around their Rolls Royces, and he just went like this the whole way along the street. This is an amazing thing and very characteristic of the shul that we grew up in. So I think about that a lot, and what it gave me. It gave me a lot of strength. It gave me a lot of strength to be proud of my own identity, to be proud of my own observance, even in a non-religious context, to understand the beauty of Yiddishkeit and sharing it, the warmth and the amazing ability to build community that my parents had, and to take that on. Those are all gifts that I really received from that time, growing up in Great Portland Street. But I will say that I then ran to Israel and never looked back, because after all of that restriction, what I found in Jerusalem was possibility. Possibility within the frame of halakha, possibility out of the frame of halakha. But what it was a very vibrant Jewish existence with options. There wasn't just one way. And that became very meaningful to me, both as a young Jewish person who's searching, but mostly as a woman, because all of a sudden I found myself in a neighborhood with Orthodox congregations that were doing things that were unheard of in England. And that led me to study at a place called Machon Pardes, which some of you may know of. Again, very different in those days to now. I think now it's very accepted and understood. It was the first mixed learning yeshiva, boys and girls together, of its kind in an Orthodox context. And for me, that was very important, because I'd been very much learned, even though I went to Southampton High School, I'd been to a single-sex school, my Jewish environment had always been a mixed environment. And I couldn't fathom having to put myself in a single-sex environment in order to learn Torah. I really felt like I needed that chedruta to be able to, whether it's a woman or a man, to be able to have those options and not be restricted in that way, but still to be able to have that Orthodox environment. And one of the other things that pulled me into it was the fact that their emphasis was on teaching you how to learn, giving you the tech skills to be able to learn for yourself, as opposed to the emphasis on hashgacha, which is a particular way of looking at things. It was very much learn the halacha, learn for yourself how to learn, how to look up the sources, how to look things up so that you can be a literate and learned Jew, and then you will be able to navigate the opinions and find your Rav, find your community, and navigate it within it, instead of it just being given to you. And those are the things that Jerusalem's Orthodox community really gave me, and Pardes really gave me. When I wanted to go to Pardes originally, straight after Leeds University, I actually went to the chief rabbi's office, who were giving scholarships for people to go and learn in Israel for the year. And I asked for a scholarship, and I told them where I wanted to learn. And they looked at me and said, if you learn there, there will not only be a black mark on your head, but you will never be able to teach in Jewish education in England ever again. It was completely taboo. It was the days where limud was taboo. Anything slightly alternative was taboo. Anyone that had anyone conservative or reform attending it was taboo. And one of the greatest revelations I had from learning at Pardes was that some of there were conservative people there and reform people there. All the teachers were Orthodox, and all the learning was in the framework of halakha, but anyone could come and learn, no matter what denomination. So the participants, it was non-denominational. And I started to understand that a lot of the conservative people there and some of the conservative rabbis there were much frummer than me, and so much more knowledgeable than me, and so much more committed to halakha than me. I'd be makil on X, Y, and Z, and they'd be completely machmeh. And it just, it was a complete mind turn for me to understand a Jewish world that can be very different, and that commitment is about learning and observance, not necessarily about labels and denominations. And that was a very important revelation for me at the time. So my siblings and myself, we all ended up in Israel. And at one point, my father said to me, I think it was when I was just about to make Aliyah, he said to me, why did you leave? And I looked at him and I said, Daddy, did you not think we were listening to your fiery Zionist Kol Nidra speeches about going to Israel and being part of the Jewish people? Like, you've imbibed that in us from the beginning, and you've been talking about that to your congregation. And he was like, oh. So it was really our father's legacy that brought us here. And all four of us ended up coming here and raising our families here, which has been the most incredible zchut. So again, at Pardes, one of the things that was another revelation to me was that England was not the center of the universe. My esteemed Rav Lauer at the time, the day I walked in there, because I was the only British person there that year, it was all Americans and Israelis, said, you do realize that if the British Isles sunk into the sea tomorrow, the world Jewish community wouldn't really notice. And I was so offended, so deeply offended. But it made me go on a journey of understanding and discovery that I now understand as, I think, America's in one place in terms of movement and innovation in halakha and modernization of Yiddishkeit. And Israel is 10 years behind that. England's 10 years behind that. And South Africa is 10 years behind that. And it seems that there's this lag in terms of what's happening in the Jewish world. But there's incredible movement and there's incredible development, and it's happening. And I'm very proud to have come from that British tradition and see what's happening now in the British Jewish community. It's very, it's wonderful to me. I saw, Juliet shared with me the Megillah reading that you had, and so proud to see the women there reading Megillah together, despite whatever the people on high are saying. And that's just wonderful to see. For me, being in Jerusalem, it's been the biggest gift to be able to have this environment for my daughters. I'm so jealous. Their bat mitzvahs, my daughter read, we had in our shul, the women go into a separate room, and my daughter read the entire Sedra, the Haftarah, then went back into the main shul and gave the Dvar Torah, and was maybe more literate than most of the boys, and in the way she read, and in her understanding of her learning. And she now goes to a school called Pelech, which is an Orthodox feminist school, which again, when she got in there, she was all nervous. I started crying. I said, you don't know how lucky you are to have these role models. They all learn Gemara in school. All the women there are about women's leadership, about Yoatzot Halacha, and about being Talmidot Chachamot, and learning at the same level as the boys, and having every opportunity that the boys have to become Jewishly literate. and to take on positions of Jewish leadership. Again, those positions at the moment are still being fought for and fluid, and we're trying to define them. You know, Yoatzot Halacha, Maharatz, and Rabbanitz, or Rabbi, or what do we call, etc., etc. Which positions do women take in Orthodox leadership now? But it's moving, and it's moving forward. And what we're seeing, the bottom line, is learned Jewish women. And my daughter has every opportunity to have that. And that's the hugest bracha in the world for me to see. So moving on. Arshul. Talked about the bat mitzvahs. One of the things that happens in our shul is our Rav is Rav Melchior, and I have a very loud voice. Some people call it the epitome of Kol Isha. It gets me into trouble a lot. When I'm davening, I can't help but be heard. And if I try and make it smaller, I feel like my davening is smaller and I can't express myself, and I have to make myself smaller in order to not disturb other people. So when I finally found a shul where I felt like I could just daven and not think about it from the women's side, it was a wonderful thing for me. And it, by accident, happened that during Mosaf of Yom Kippur every year, the Shaliach Tzibor was singing so beautifully a lot of the melodies that I knew from my childhood, and I would automatically do the harmony. It would just come out in my davening. I would just go into my own zone, and it would just come out. And afterwards, the women all came up to me and said, "That was so helpful and so wonderful for us." And I said, "But I was just davening, you know, whatever." And they really appreciated it. And it's come to a point where they go up to my husband and say, "Gaby better be in shul for Mosaf of Yom Kippur," because they find that I'm almost like the Shlichat Tzibor on the women's side that's helping them follow and helping them connect. And the wonderful Shaliach Tzibor on the other side requested that I sit on the other side of the Mechitza, because he actually found it was enhancing his davening for me to be able to do the harmonies with him. Now this caused a great controversy, because most of the shul loved it, and some of the shul, the more traditional people, were disturbed by it. And I didn't want to disturb anybody. That's also part of this fight between being able to express and be free, and not wanting to encroach on other people and disturb their freedom. And one Rosh Hashanah a couple of years ago, my husband came with a check to pay for membership this year, and he got a message say, "Please pass this message on to your wife to tone it down a bit this year." And he ripped up the check, and he's a very, very frum, very, very straight-laced South African B'nai Akiva boy. So this is quite amazing for him also. He's been on quite the journey. Just so you know, it was very difficult for us to decide to get married, because I wasn't going to cover my hair. That's something that I'd learned out halachically, and for me, in the community that I was living in, made sense to me. I cover my hair in shul. I don't cover my hair outside of shul. And I was wearing shorts, and I was singing in public, in shows. And for my husband to be, this was something that he'd never encountered. And we went through a long process of trying to figure it out with each other. Well, we finally came to an understanding that spiritually, I'm probably more connected and committed than he is. And he's the very strict learning and halacha man. And somehow we found how to tango together and raise our children together, which has been in itself a chavruta and a beautiful way of getting closer to Hashem in that journey that we've had together. So he ripped up the check in shul, and he came home and he told me, and I just burst into tears, because all of a sudden I felt like I couldn't daven anymore. I didn't have the freedom to daven. I had to close my mouth. I had to make myself quiet. And I went to the Rav, and the Rav said, "You know, people have come to me through the years and said that they weren't comfortable with it. And I have said to them, there's nothing halachically wrong with her being able to daven. She's davening tefillah. Her singing is tefillah. And if you're not comfortable with it, then maybe this isn't the kehillah for you, there are other kehillah." And I just couldn't believe it, because he'd never said a word to me, because he never wanted me to feel uncomfortable about it. And that was an incredible thing to be able to find an Orthodox community that was giving me the space where I could daven in the way that I wanted to daven. And I know that's still controversial and difficult and not always easy. And I very often have to make myself quiet and make myself small in order to respect other kihilot where they're not comfortable with that. But it was an amazing thing to be able to find my place and find my home. And know that not only am I not disturbing people, but I'm also enriching and helping other people to do that. So that's been incredible. I've been on a course here in Yerushalayim recently for Shlichei Tzibur. Not because I want to be a Shaliach Tzibur. Halachically, I'm still not in a place where I would ever feel comfortable with that, apart from in women's tefillah. But a lot of women came because they're leading women's partnership or women's only minyanim or prayer groups or tefillot, and they want to become literate into how to lead the davening and the halachot behind the davening. So I decided to go and do that, and it's actually become very poignant this year because, again, shul, as we know, is going to be a very complicated matter this Yomim Noraim, and especially for us because of Hallel, who has Down syndrome and she's very high risk. So we're going to need to self-isolate as much as possible. And understanding that we might be isolated at home this Yomim Noraim, and the tefillot being so meaningful to us and such a need for us to be able to have that process during the Yomim Noraim. So I'm going off to learn the davening for the Yomim Noraim, and my husband's been joking that he's going to be the Baal Tokea and I'll be the Shaliach Tzibur. So we'll see what happens over the Chagim. With what happens to that. Actually, it's been a tradition for the last few years that happened also by accident, because I was allowed to be in shul for Mosaf of Yom Kippur and Stephen was looking after the kids, so I would stay at home with the kids for Ne'ilah. And what I would do was take the kids out into the garden. As you know, in Israel, we all kind of live around shared gardens or shared courtyards with all the balconies around. And usually on Ne'ilah, everyone's in shul, so it's very, very quiet. So I would daven Ne'ilah in the garden with the kids, and I get them to join in, and I taught them Ne'ilah, and we would sing at the top of our voices and say Hashem Hu Elokim at the top of our voices and dance L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim at the top of our voices. And we found more and more women who are at home have come out on their balconies and joined in with us for Ne'ilah. So Ne'ilah's kind of become a highlight of my year with the kids that we're davening in the garden. And there's something very, very beautiful about that, and that empowerment of being able to daven at home and together and freely. So Juliet asked me also to talk a little bit about my life in Jerusalem. So I think there's three aspects to it that I was going to share with you. I don't know how I'm doing with time, so Juliet, you'll have to keep a check on me. I'm just keeping on talking. One is the theatre community. The other is advocating for prevention of breast cancer and ovarian cancer. One is pluralism in Jerusalem, and the other thing is advocacy for special needs. So I'll start with the theatre world, just a few anecdotes about the theatre world. One of the greatest things here is the English-speaking theatre world. There are some wonderful people, and it creates an incredible community. But one of the most special things about it is its ability to enable from people to be involved in musical theatre. It necessitates a little bit of flexibility, but there are shows here where they accommodate people who want to be Shomer Negia on stage, even in lead roles. And people who cover their hair and all kinds of other things. There's a lot of accommodation here for people who, for different halakhic reasons, still want to be able to perform in a mixed production and in, you know, a non-Jewish themed production, the classic West End musicals. It's been amazing to see again that the Jerusalem feeling of being able to enable as opposed to putting on the fences and saying no. And it never forces anybody to be in a place where they wouldn't be comfortable, and no one's ever forced to come to see a show in a place where they wouldn't be comfortable, but the options and the spectrum of options is there for everybody, and that's something that's very valuable about being here. There's really a whole spectrum of places that you can be, and everyone finds their comfort zone and somehow respects each other, which is really amazing. In terms of pluralism, I live in a neighborhood called Talpiot. It's right near Kiryat Maria. where Machon took place, where I met Julia. You know, Machon. And one of the great things that I discovered about Talpiot was it's a very heterogeneous neighborhood. There are people here of all ages. There are people here of all adots, of all backgrounds, from all countries, from all from the full spectrum, from Haredi to Reform and Reconstructionist to secular, and everybody very much lives in harmony here and respects each other. And Jerusalem has become a bit of a battleground in the past decade. The Haredim very much, and I don't want to use it as a blanket term because I don't like to label any particular group of people, but there have been Haredi movements in politics that have been trying to gain control of the city and what happens in the city. And part of that debate, for example, is what do you do about Shabbat? Because at the point where you say you want to shut down the city completely, and there is no place for a secular person to be able to express themselves on the weekend. For example, you're a secular person who lives in Jerusalem and you want to go visit your grandma and you can't afford to take a taxi, but there's no public transportation. And you don't have a Sunday on which to do that. Shabbat is the only day you have to be able to have a weekend and to be able to do anything, to be able to get together with your family or friends, to be able to go and enjoy yourself. There is no other time to do that. So how do we create a city in which there is diversity, but there is respect between the communities, and everyone is able to have the place where they feel comfortable? And so I worked for a long time for an organization called Yerushalem, which was trying to create that peace between the different communities. We, for example, started activities on Shabbat afternoons in public parks that didn't break Shabbat, but had activities for kids and brought people and families and brought secular and religious together out to do things together. So, yeah, and it was incredibly unifying for the city because there's this incredible drain of secular people at the moment from Jerusalem. You also see it a lot in politics. There's a lot of nasty things going on in government where a secular neighborhood will suddenly have a new housing project that is meant for the young people in that neighborhood, and the Haredi parties will take control of it and move in 400 Haredi families, not just with the intent of sharing the neighborhood, but with the intent of Harediizing the neighborhood. And that's happened in quite a few neighborhoods, and the secular people have just left on that. So unless we just want to have a very strict Haredi religious-only city as Jerusalem, which is one standpoint, which is legitimate if you want to see it that way. But if we really want to have a city like I see, Sheikh Khubra, for all people, and brings the Jewish people and the nations of the world together, then I really think we have to keep fighting to be able to keep the character of the city as a pluralist city and make space for everybody. And that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about and that I work towards. So as Juliette can also tell you, in our personal family lives, we've had a lot of melodramas. Just as an example, my eldest son was born on the day my father died, and my father was being brought over to be buried in Panovich Yeshiva, connection to my mother's family actually. And I went into labor as they told me he was coming, and I didn't tell my siblings, and I was in labor all night and the baby wasn't coming, and the funeral was at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it's 10 o'clock and the baby's still not coming, and the doctors are getting worried, and my husband said, just wait, the funeral is at 11, let's see what happens, etc., etc. And literally the clock switched to 11 and the baby shot out and the phone rang, and it was my sisters saying the funeral started, where are you? And we said it's a boy, and it was this incredible melodrama, and the joy and the sorrow, all those kind of things have been very much present in our lives, for better and for worse. The bracha or l'chlala, we try and see it the bracha and understand the beauty in the things that have been hard for us. And one of those things has been finding out that I have the Brecker Gene. For anyone that doesn't know, the Brecker Gene is very common among Ashkenazi women, and it gives you a very high risk of getting breast cancer or ovarian cancer. I have a cousin who died very young, and finding that out was at first terrifying, and then became an understanding that knowledge is power. And I've very much taken on the role of advocacy, because knowledge is power and awareness, and so many lives have been saved by people getting tested and finding out that they have the gene and being able to either undergo surveillance or have preventative mastectomies. I chose to have a preventative mastectomy, and I'm grateful every day. I say Mother Annie every single day for the gift of life that I've been given, for the gift of taking that worry away, that I'm now at lower risk than the general population for, God forbid, getting sick from breast cancer or ovarian cancer. It was a hard journey to go through, but I really see it that I was given a bracha to be able to take away that klala. So get tested, anyone. If there's any history at all of cancer in the family, my bracha to you is to go and get tested. Please be safe, please be healthy. It's 1 in 40 in the Ashkenazi Jewish community instead of 1 in 400 in the general community. And knowledge really saves lives. Here in Yerushalayim, again, in the Haredi world, it's very difficult because they don't have the usual channels of communication. And talking about women's bodies is something that is very taboo, especially talking about breasts. So you can't even give out pamphlets, you can't even use the word. And so there has to be different ways to get to women and empower women in that community to be able to make sure that they're safe and that they're looking after themselves and making sure that they can prevent getting sick, and to know if they have the gene so that they can take the action that they need to take. So that's another area thing that's going on. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is special needs and inclusion in Israel. So as you saw, I have this gorgeous little one called Hillel. She's our light and joy. And I still resent the time that she was born, because the world had its classic reaction of, oy vey, something terrible has just happened. Instead of, wow, beautiful little girl's just been born. And we had to fight the world to hold on to that second reaction. And as she's grown, it's just become more and more obvious to us that this child is the most wonderful gift, is the most wonderful kid, just like any of our other kids. That difference doesn't mean less worthy, it's different. And she just brings joy wherever she goes, and she's breaking through barriers and leaps and bounds. She reads and writes in English and in Hebrew. She's included in a regular school. She is loved by all her friends and her peers, and she's just fantastic. And please God, the sky is the limit for her. But we had to fight every step of the way for every little thing for her to be included in. So on the one hand, Israel is incredible in the world of special needs. And I kind of analyzed it as, in a very Jewish way, as a Jewish state, Israel is a welfare state. It's wonderful at looking after anybody that needs your help or needs your support. So the injured, people from the army, anyone who's sick, the poor, this country rallies round, whether governmentally or whether through the Amutot, through the non-profit organizations that fill in the gaps. No one gets left behind here. And they will look after you from A to Z. And that happens in the world of special needs. But here, that's very much caring for you. It's an issue also of chesed, attitude, as opposed to tzedek. It's like, I'm going to do something nice for you, and I'm going to care for you, as opposed to I'm going to include you because it's the right thing to do. And my work very much has been about shifting those attitudes from chesed to tzedek, and from caring for you to making you a part of the world and including you as an equal. That's been very tough. There's been some massive setbacks in the government recently. There was a law that took 20 years of hard work by many dedicated activists to be passed, called the Inclusion Law, where it was your legal right to choose whether your child went into a special education separate framework or into an inclusion framework. And then another law was passed to say, because there was a problem with that, because even though you had the right to do it, if you sent your kid to an inclusion framework into a regular school, you didn't get all the therapies and the aids and the support that you got in the special education. And the lobbying and the advocacy work was to say, okay, the budget's there. If this same kid goes into special education, they have this whole budget for all the resources that you're giving them. So if they go into inclusion, that basket of services should come with the child, not with the institution. And there was something called the inclusion law, the Dorner Law, that was passed that and said, yes, that's obviously right. It went to the Supreme Court and it said, yes, that is equality and the budget is there and that's the way the system should work. The system wanted to buck the passing of the law because they didn't want to pay for it, and the special education institutions didn't want to share their resources. And recently, a law was passed, basically taking it all back again. And now we're in a situation where it's basically not a choice to include your child, because it's either you get everything or you get nothing. So the people who are including and fighting for that inclusion battle, which, as I see with Hillel, is totally the right environment for her, and she's flourishing and learning how to be a part of the world, and it's going to take her to be a productive member of society instead of a dependent member of society. They're being very short-sighted about it, and there's a big mess going on in the Knesset. Actually got thrown out of the Knesset because you know, I'm not a very political person, and political deals and politics breaks my heart because I'm just not built for it. And after months and months of lobbying and trying to stop this law getting passed, I saw the Democracy in Action, which was basically a whole lot of MKs walked into the vote who had never read the bill, who had never been to any of the discussions over the past few months that had been happening, hadn't listened to any of the advice of all the non-profit organizations that was telling them why this was a bad idea. One of the MKs came in, said, put your hand up now. They were all a faction together. They put up their hands, they walked out again. They didn't even know what they were voting on. I started screaming and I got thrown out of the Knesset on TV, which caused great awareness. And I got the message out, but I got, you know, the security guards were carrying me out with the TV cameras rolling. And I was like, oh dear. And I picked up the phone and I said to my husband, I said, Stephen, I'm really sorry. I'm going to be on TV with some security guards throwing me out of the Knesset. I think he's forgiven me by now, but yeah. So the battle continues. There's some incredible things going on, which are the lights in the darkness. The inclusion I'm going to talk. One of them is Shalva. I wanted to speak about Shalva today. Shalva is a wonderful institution that was set up by Coleman and Mcauley Samuels, and serves all the kids with special needs in the Jerusalem area. We're very grateful to them for the early intervention that they did for Hillel. For, you know, all parents of kids with special needs sigh a sigh of relief because they take our kids away for a week in August. Now that's really not going to happen this year, which is a bit of a stress. But the respite to know that your kid is having a wonderful time, and you can either go on holiday with your other kids or you can go away on your own for a week, is one of the most incredible gifts you can give to a parent of a child with special needs. And that's one of the things that Shelva does that's invaluable. And she also goes to their afternoon school program. Thinking with that for us was very much that she's included all day long, and that's hard work, and she has her typical peers. But as she gets older, the gap is going to widen, and they'll still be her friends, but everybody needs people that you can relate to, and she's going to need her peers who she can relate to, and we want to make sure that she has them from now as well. So she both has that environment of being included in the regular school and her class and all the different Chugim and B'nai Akiva who are wonderful. She walks down the street in our neighborhood like a superhero, getting high fives from every kid in the neighborhood because of B'nai Akiva. It's an amazing thing to see. And the kids initiated that themselves. They used to have a separate shevet called Shevet Yuval, and they lobbied to have an inclusion shevet, which would mean that she would be included in the regular group. It's just amazing to see the kids themselves took that on and made that happen. So she goes to Shalva in the afternoon. And there are all these amazing people in the city fighting for all these things, whether it's advocacy for inclusion and special needs, whether it's for pluralism in Jerusalem, whether it's for health for women, whatever it is, or whether it's for that smorgasbord and spectrum of options for being Jewish in many, many ways, so that everybody can express their Yiddishkeit and express their Judaism in a way that is meaningful to them and enriches their lives, while we all manage to live together. Every day I walk out of my house, I have the view of the Tayelet at the end of the street, and I see where I live, and I say Muadani. for the bracha of living in Yerushalayim and everything that comes with it. Very, very blessed in that sense. And if anybody has any questions, I can go.
Wow, Gaby, I don't even know where to begin. I know I definitely have lots and lots of things that I would like to ask, but let's open up to ladies, if anyone would like to share, to ask Gaby any questions on what she's just shared, the amazing aspects of so many things that she's just shared with us. Please unmute yourself and either to comment or to ask a question.
Can I ask a question? Or can I?
Sure.
Okay, so we also have a son who's special needs. He's now nearly 31. We tried putting him in a non-primary school with support, and it didn't work because it was fine while the support was there, but in England it's quite difficult to get support for a full day. And we found that he actually thrived by going to a special needs school, because there he got all the attention he needed all day, every day. I actually think the best of both worlds is a special needs unit within a mainstream school where the children can join in with activities that it's possible for them to keep up with, art, music, whatever, and then have their own lessons for where they need extra support. And that's just been our experience of what suited our son.
So I think what I would say to that is absolutely every child is its own universe. And what we are advocating for in terms of inclusion rights in Jerusalem is not to say you shouldn't have the option of being in special needs, or you shouldn't have the option of that small class, but that everyone should have the option that they can choose, and that option is funded equally and has the same amount of services, so that everybody has the potential to reach their potential in whatever framework they choose. And that's what's not happening now. It's very difficult.
Unfortunately, there's not the financial support here for that to happen properly.
Right. So it's happening here too, except that the finances are there to the absurd point where if your child goes into that special education framework, they get that funding, they're allocated that funding, but it doesn't come with them if you step out of it. And that's what we're trying to change. And I know for Hillel that all the way along, people were trying to limit her and say, no, it will be better for her, be more supportive for her in this environment, be more supportive. And she's actually flourishing in that fully included environment when she has the right support. She needs that right support, but when she has it, she's at grade level and she's managing. Now that's not every kid, but for the kids that can have that potential, we just want to make sure that the opportunities are there for every child to be able to be in the environment that helps them fulfill their own potential. And good luck.
Thank you. I'm not sure the mainstream schools in this country want to have children with special needs because it's more costly and it takes more of their time and they don't have the resources.
Right. So again, it's a battle. It's a battle for equality. It's a battle for awareness. It's a battle to break all the stereotypes. I never dreamed that a child with Down syndrome would be like the child I have. I had very archaic ideas of what that meant. And you know, it's a different world these days, thank God. So we just have the courage to keep fighting for what we want for our kids and for what our kids need, and for the world to for the world to stop being the problem.
Yeah.
Anyone else have something they wanted to contribute? Amanda.
Hi, Gaby. Nice to see
you. Hey, Amanda. Lovely to see you.
To say, one is I find it depressing to hear. I've worked in school finance, and I find it really depressing to hear that you have to fight. I know in England you have to fight for every penny for a special needs child, and it's really depressing to hear that in Israel it's the same, because you sort of hope that Israeli society might be a bit more on a higher level, but clearly not. And so I'm sorry to hear that you're having to fight so hard. It's my experience is that I'm sure some of the teachers on this call will say the same, that everything is always a battle, that you spend your whole Senkos, etc., spend the whole time fighting the local authorities, fighting the restriction because people don't want to give them money. So I'm sorry to hear that, and I wish you hatzlacha to get everything your daughter needs and deserves. And thank you also for sharing about your life in Jerusalem. My dream would be to live in Jerusalem. My husband has other ideas, but so I say that when we win the lottery, you'll know we've won the lottery because we'll have a house in Jerusalem and we'll have a house on the coast somewhere. So
amen.
Please God, please God, we should we'll be in, and it's really inspiring also to hear that you took on the message that your father was preaching to say make Aliyah, because I'm hoping my children will follow the example. We've been telling them to make Aliyah, so
I hope you get lots of nachas from them and that they come so that you can come.
Absolutely. And
once the grandchildren are here, you've got no excuse.
Well, that's what, trust me, I'd be there tomorrow. I'd be there tomorrow if I could. So I'm really interested to know more about sort of, I mean, you know, the Megillah reading was an amazing experience. A lot of the women on this call were involved in that or came to hear it, and it was fantastic. It's lovely to hear that women can be pushing the boundaries forward in Israel. So we're looking forward to ideas and things we can do in that respect. So Mike, come and pick your brains about ways we can take that forward too.
Pleasure.
Yeah, Gaby, one of the big moves that we've had is instituting women's officers. So the idea of a female gabba, basically, or gabayit kind of idea, and Amanda's taken on that role in our shul, which we've already seen, you know, in the very short, I think Amanda's at a year. It's just a year, I think, or not even yet. Just over a year, has really made a big difference. And the fact that we had a Megillah reading with so many women took part in, I think one of the things that really nice to see as well is actually it was with the blessing of the chief rabbi and the Beth Din and United Synagogue. It's not, you know, there are certain things that are not a fight anymore, which I know, like you said, we're 10 years behind Israel, but at least we're there. And I think that we are seeing you know, incredible opportunities for women, which is really important.
But it's been very interesting for me to see Rabbi Markowitz and how he tackled the situation, because Rabbi Markowitz comes from here and knows very much all the stuff that's going on here and that is seen as halakhically acceptable, but is facing a reality where he's got a spectrum of political ideologies to be able to balance. And in order to maintain legitimacy in representing them all, he possibly can't be as lenient in terms of making things possible, but he knows that they are possible. So keep fighting, ladies.
I saw something. I think it was when Chief Rabbi Sachs was being interviewed by the BBC. He said something along the lines of, "And now we've made such strides for women." This was at the beginning of his chief rabbinate. "We've made such strides for women in the community that now a woman can teach women in her community." And I was laughing because, you know, it was before I was born, but you'd think, like, really, that was radical that a woman can teach women. And, you know, thank goodness we are seeing that there are you know, incredible female educators that can teach men and women in all different settings. You know, I've given sermons in synagogues, and the Mayan program is something that, you know, again, we're seeing that yes, it is a dinosaur, the United Synagogue, but it's a dinosaur that's very slowly moving. And I think that, you know, with Amanda's help, it's really been wonderful to see the ideas that are coming up. So
but we've also got that wonderful Rebbetzin. Jacqueline is an amazing inspiration to us all, I think. I think she, you know, she's definitely following in the footsteps of where your mother probably was and just wasn't getting the credit for it. And Jacqueline thankfully gets the credit for all she does as well. So
yes,
moved on.
A lot of bravery to do it in that world. Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Gaby, one of the things that did actually make me laugh, first of all, to hear you speak as the daughter of a rabbi, is very important for me to bear that in mind. We have one daughter and who's very shy. So it was very interesting for me to hear your perspective, but also that I know that it does affect all the family, the dynamic. We don't have all the lords and ladies and Rolls Royces here in Bushy. We're a bit more low key over here, but, you know, still it is a very public life. But the other story that actually was making me smile when you spoke about your mother and the role of a Rebbetzin. So I think, like Amanda said, I'm very blessed that for the most part, I think people do value the fact that, you know, I am in a leadership position with my husband, not that he is the only one, so, not always, but for the most part. But I was actually once at a wedding where I was introduced to a female reform rabbi, we were there together, and what I found so fascinating was that she really wasn't interested in giving me the time of day, because in her mind my husband was the rabbi and I wasn't a peer. And to me that was hilarious. It was like she didn't realize that actually, you know, I also educated, I'm also involved in the community, and we could have a conversation, because actually for her husband was an accountant, so he didn't have a communal role. But I can definitely hear, you know, in terms of your mother, and Juliet sent me an amazing video of your mother speaking about her time in the shul, Kanai Nahora, really incredible to see. But just amazing, and that must have been, you know, I think quite forward for her time to be like that, to be quite as involved as she was and doing quite as much as she was.
Yeah, I'm always bowled over by what she did and how much courage she had, to be able to take that, have that much of a presence and be that active, in parallel with such a strong and charismatic figure as my father. Must be quite a difficult thing to do, and that their marriage was so harmonious, and the way they worked together was so harmonious, and the way they managed to have so much impact on the Jewish community together. You know, it may not have been recognized officially, but we could see it, and I see it now retrospectively of how much that was her career, and she really deserved the credit for that. When you're talking about Rabbi's children, actually Rabbi James Kennard was the chaplain when Juliet and I were at Leeds. And he came up to me one day in Hillel and he said, "Can you please tell me how your parents brought you up?" And I said, "What?" And he said, just please tell me. So it was very strange. I started explaining a little bit. And in the end I said, "Well, why do you want to know?" And it turned out that there were two other rabbis' daughters in Hillel at the time with me, and both of them weren't keeping Shabbat anymore and weren't keeping kosher. And he wanted to know how to do it right. And that also blew me away, then and now, that he was thinking of that and trying to think of, as a rabbi, how to raise his children in a way that would not only keep them in the fold, but want them to be out there leading and bringing Yiddishkeit to others.
Wow. I think that one of the blessings of lockdown, there's been lots of challenges, but one of the blessings for us is that Shabbat has been Shabbat. It hasn't been, you know, you said having guests at every meal and going to shul, and, you know, it's been family time. We've gone on walks and we've played games and we've had meals just us, and that has been a real blessing. So yeah, I definitely hear, and I think that maybe we have the benefit of knowing people who've had that struggle from children of rabbis who are now our colleagues, or, you know, like you said, who have actually moved away from Judaism because of what they went through. So we have to be very aware of that, and it's hard.
Yeah, I think that the people don't really understand the amount of pressure that's entailed in growing up that way.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments for Gaby? I know it's very late for you, Gaby.
That's okay.
Gaby,
I wanted it to go until midnight, because I don't know if you know, but it's Juliet's birthday at midnight.
Oh.
And I wanted us all to be able to wish her a very happy birthday.
Well, we will sing happy birthday at the end, but I think Jeanette has a question for you first.
Well,
Okay.
hi, it's not actually a question. I just really wanted to say, Kol HaKavod, you've given me such a wonderful sense of belonging. We have two daughters in Israel, one actually living in Jerusalem, and we have a place neighbors to you. We're in Arnona. And I absolutely recognized all those sentiments of walking around in Jerusalem, feeling that sense of freedom in religious sense, and yet I do hear a lot of people saying, you know, they couldn't imagine living in Jerusalem because it's so repressive, and I don't sense that. And also, whenever my husband and I are in Jerusalem, we do attend from time to time Pardes, and it's an amazing place. So everything you've done tonight, thank you so much. It's bringing me back to Jerusalem, where we haven't been able to go to because of the virus. And I've just felt I've been there this evening. So thank you. Kol hakavod.
Thank you so much. It's very, very meaningful to me. Thank you very, very much. And I hope we get to meet on the streets of Ra'anana one day soon in a safer, happier world.
Please God.
Please
We'd love
God.
that. Take care.
So thank you, Gaby, so much again. Thank you, Juliet, for making this happen. This has been, there's so many things you've brought up and so many things that we've all got so much to think about now, but so much that resonated, I think, both with myself and I'm sure with everyone who's been listening in. Really, kol hakavod for the amazing work that you're doing. And for giving us a taste of it. You know, we really feel like we've had, like Jeanette said, we've had a virtual trip to Jerusalem tonight. So we all miss it. We were meant to be there for Pesach. I'm sure there's lots of others that had trips planned, or, you know, that is, we all feel that's our home. We're all heading there. So thank you for giving us a glimpse into that. And if it's okay with everyone, if we all unmute our microphones, we can all sing happy birthday to Juliet now. This is very exciting.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you don't mind if we share that it's your big birthday, Julia.